The universe has already ended. Not will end. Not is ending. It ended a very long time ago. What remains is that it keeps going. If that sentence feels unsettling, if it leaves a hollow space in your chest, or a faint chill behind your eyes, then you are already standing close to the heart of this story. Because the most disturbing idea is not destruction, it is continuation. Not the moment when everything collapses, but the moment when there is nothing left to collapse and time continues anyway. You are listening to Whispers of the Universe. If this quiet place means something to you, press like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel. Not to feed an algorithm, but to leave a trace to mark that, for a brief and fragile moment in cosmic history, there was still a mind listening. Now, stay with me. Imagine a future so distant that all familiar measures of time dissolve. No days, no years, no eras, only numbers so vast that the human brain was never shaped to hold them. Trillions upon trillions of years stretch outward, not toward an event, but toward an absence. In that far future, there is no explosion, no final flash of light, no galaxies tearing each other apart, no stars screaming as they collapse, no dramatic ending worthy of myth or scripture. Everything simply becomes even. Temperature smooths out across the cosmos. There are no hot places left for energy to flow from, and no cold places left for it to flow toward. No gradients, no tension, no imbalance. Motion does not stop, but it loses all consequence. Nothing happens that meaningfully changes anything else. Physics calls this state heat death, but the word death misleads us, because there is no moment of dying, no final breath, no last heartbeat of the cosmos. Heat death is not an ending, it is a condition, a state the universe enters and then never truly leaves. A quiet plateau where everything that could happen has already happened, and everything that will happen is indistinguishable from what came before. And yet, the universe still exists. This is the first fracture in our intuition. We are trained to believe that existence requires activity, that being requires becoming, that without events, without change, without experience, there is nothing worth calling real. But the universe does not share that belief. Long after the last star has burned out, long after the final black holes evaporate into thin radiation, space-time itself remains vast, empty, cold, almost perfectly uniform, almost perfectly still. Almost. Time has not stopped. The equations that describe it still run. Seconds follow seconds. Causality has not broken. It has simply lost anything interesting to carry forward. And here, in this nearly frozen infinity, a disturbing question begins to surface. Why does it continue at all? There is no audience, no memory, no life to notice the passing moments, no consciousness left to feel boredom, or loneliness, or awe. The universe is not alive in any meaningful sense. It does not think, it does not observe itself, it does not care that it exists. And yet, it persists. We often imagine existence as something justified by experience. We believe things matter because they are felt. We believe time matters because someone is there to feel it passing. But in this future, there is no one left to feel anything. The universe exists without living. It continues without witnessing. It stretches on without purpose. This is where the discomfort deepens. Because if the universe can exist without experience, then experience was never a requirement. Meaning was never a condition. Awareness was never a foundation. They were visitors. For a brief window so short it barely registers on the cosmic scale, complex matter arranged itself into systems that could observe, remember, and ask questions. Systems like us. And for that fleeting moment, existence felt rich, eventful, urgent. But the universe was never built around that moment. Heat death reveals something subtle and unsettling. Continuation does not need a reason. The universe does not ask why it should go on. It simply has no mechanism that forces it to stop. There is no cosmic off switch, no rule that says, When nothing interesting remains, shut everything down. So time flows on, not dramatically, not meaningfully, but relentlessly. A river without banks, a motion without destination, a duration without intention. This kind of persistence feels wrong to us. We crave endings because endings give shape to stories. They tell us when something mattered. They allow us to close the book, but the universe is not telling a story. It is not building toward a conclusion. It is not saving its best moment for last. It is merely remaining. And as we drift deeper into this idea, another thought begins to form, quiet, slow, and difficult to push away. If the universe can continue without events, without life, without meaning, then what exactly was our role in all of this? Were we the point of the universe, or were we just a brief disturbance, a flicker of complexity in an otherwise endless calm? That question does not arrive with urgency. It does not demand an answer. It simply hangs there, suspended in the cold future, waiting to be carried forward by a time that no longer cares who is listening. And as we follow it slowly, gently, we begin to move toward the next layer of this silence. Because to understand why the universe keeps going, we first have to let go of the idea that it ever needed a reason. Time does not stop when nothing happens. It has no such instinct. After the universe slips into heat death, after stars are gone, after structure dissolves, after every dramatic chapter has already been written, time continues with the same indifference it always had. Not slower, not faster, just forward. This is the second quiet shock hidden inside the future of the cosmos. We imagine time as something that needs events to justify itself. A clock needs ticking, a story needs scenes, a life needs moments. Without change, we assume time must collapse into irrelevance. But the universe does not measure time the way we do. Picture an empty room with a clock on the wall. No people, no movement, no sound, except the faint mechanical pulse of seconds advancing. If no one is there to see it, does the clock stop? Of course not. It continues, obedient to its internal rules, indifferent to observation. Now remove the room, remove the clock, remove even the walls of space as we know them. What remains is space-time itself, still structured, still ordered, still unfolding according to equations that never asked whether anyone was watching. Time, in physics, is not a story. It is a parameter, a dimension, a coordinate that allows one state of the universe to be distinguished from another, even if those states look almost identical. And in the far future, those states will look almost identical. This is where intuition begins to fail us, because we associate time with experience, with anticipation and memory, with waiting and regret, with the feeling that something is about to happen or has already happened. But experience is not built into time. Experience is something layered on top of it, something fragile, local, temporary. When all observers are gone, time does not vanish. It simply loses its witnesses. In a heat-dead universe, there are no events in the way we understand them. No stars igniting, no galaxies colliding, no chemistry complex enough to sustain metabolism or thought. Matter is spread thin. Energy differences are flattened. Everything that could fall has already fallen. And yet, the universe at one moment is not identical to the universe a moment later. The difference is unimaginably small, but it exists. Quantum fields still fluctuate. Virtual particles appear and disappear. Black holes, if any remain, continue their slow evaporation through Hawking radiation, shedding mass over spans of time so vast they defy comprehension. Protons, according to some theories, may eventually decay, transforming matter into lighter particles across timescales longer than the current age of the universe, multiplied by trillions. These are not events you can build a narrative around. They do not form arcs. They do not escalate. They do not resolve. They are whispers, and whispers are enough for time to keep going. Here lies the conflict. We crave a universe that finishes, a universe that closes its eyes when the last meaningful thing is done. But physics offers no such courtesy. There is no rule stating that when complexity drops below a certain threshold, the universe must shut itself down. Instead, the equations describe a cosmos that asymptotically approaches stillness, forever getting closer, never arriving. Time continues because nothing tells it not to. This idea is deeply unsettling because it strips time of purpose. It suggests that duration is not earned, that persistence is not justified by richness or novelty or meaning. The universe does not continue for anything. It continues because continuation is its default state. We often imagine that something must actively sustain existence, a force, a will, a hidden engine pushing reality forward. But in modern cosmology, time is not powered by desire or necessity. It is simply embedded into the structure of space-time itself. As long as space-time exists, so does temporal ordering. And space-time, according to everything we currently understand, is astonishingly hard to get rid of. Even in the cold aftermath of heat death, space-time does not unravel. It stretches, it persists, it becomes emptier, smoother, quieter, but it does not disappear. This brings us to an uncomfortable realization. Nothing about the universe requires novelty. There is no cosmic boredom threshold, no point at which the universe looks at itself and decides there is nothing left worth doing. That kind of judgment belongs to minds, finite systems, shaped by evolution, to seek change, because change once meant survival. The universe was never shaped that way. It has no preference for excitement over monotony, no bias toward complexity over simplicity, no impatience with repetition. From the universe's perspective, 1 trillion years filled with galaxies and 1 trillion years filled with near-perfect uniformity are equally acceptable. They are simply different configurations along the same unbroken timeline. And so, after heat death, time does not feel slow to the universe. Slowness is a human perception. Without minds, there is no sensation of dragging seconds, no awareness of emptiness. There is only sequence, one state, then another, almost the same, almost indistinguishable, but not the same. This is where many people instinctively reach for philosophy, or even theology. Surely, they say, a universe without observers is incomplete. Surely, time without experience is meaningless. But physics is unmoved by that intuition. Meaning is not a physical quantity. It has no units. It does not appear in the equations. The universe does not optimize for it, preserve it, or mourn its loss. Meaning arises when matter becomes complex enough to reflect on itself. When neurons fire in patterns that create memory, desire, and fear. When a system becomes capable of asking, "Why is this happening?" But those systems are not permanent features of the cosmos. They are transient structures like waves on the surface of an ocean that does not care whether it is calm or stormy. When the waves fade, the ocean remains. Time, in this sense, is like the deep current beneath the surface. It flows whether or not there is anything riding on it. And here, quietly, another layer of the question begins to reveal itself. If time does not need events, if existence does not need experience, if the universe can persist without novelty, purpose, or awareness, then perhaps the real anomaly was never the heat-death future. Perhaps the anomaly was us. For a brief interval, the universe contained systems that noticed time, that cared about change, that measured moments and felt their passing. Systems that built calendars, wrote histories, and feared endings. That interval may have felt central while we were inside it, but from the perspective of cosmic time, it was a thin, bright scratch across an otherwise endless dark surface. This does not diminish it. It simply reframes it. The universe did not build itself for observers. Observers emerge temporarily, like frost patterns on a window that eventually melts back into glass. Time did not exist for us. We existed within it. And when we are gone, time does not grieve. It does not slow down to honor what once was. It does not pause to reflect on complexity lost. It continues, just as it always has. The thought is not dramatic. It is not catastrophic. It does not arrive with fire or collapse. It arrives quietly, like a realization that no one is coming to turn the lights off. And as we sit with that idea, this image of time stretching forward, nearly empty, nearly silent, we begin to sense the deeper strangeness of the universe's persistence. Because if time can go on without events, then what we call happening was never the foundation of reality. It was decoration. And beneath that decoration lies something far colder, far steadier, and far more patient than any story we have ever told ourselves. That steady continuation pulls us onward, away from the comfort of narratives, and toward a more unsettling question, one that does not ask what happens next, but asks what it means for anything to continue at all. Time does not ask for permission to continue. It does not wait for something to happen. It does not slow down when nothing changes. This is one of the hardest ideas to accept, because almost everything you have ever felt about time was built on events: a birthday, a loss, a beginning, an ending. Time, to the human mind, is a sequence of moments because something occurs within them. But strip those moments bare, remove motion, remove novelty, remove experience, and time does not collapse. It becomes exposed. In the far future of a heat-dead universe, nothing meaningful happens anymore. No stars ignite, no chemistry builds complexity, no structures rise and fall. Yet one instant is still followed by another. Not because it matters, not because it leads somewhere, but because the rules of reality never required meaning to begin with. To understand this, we have to let go of a deeply rooted assumption that time is defined by change. In everyday life, time feels inseparable from events. We measure it by movement, hands sweeping across a clock face, shadows shifting on a wall, heartbeats stacking one on top of another. When change slows, time feels slower. When life is dense with experience, time feels fast. But these are psychological effects, not physical truths. Physics does not define time by how much happens inside it. Time is not an emotional phenomenon. It is not tied to memory, anticipation, or awareness. In the equations that describe the universe, time is simply a dimension like space, but oriented differently. Even if nothing dramatic occurs, the coordinate still advances. This becomes unsettling in a universe where almost nothing happens at all. Imagine a cosmic moment so late that the difference between 1 trillion years and the next trillion years is effectively zero in every way you could observe, if there were still someone left to observe. The universe looks the same. It behaves the same. It contains no processes fast enough to register as events. And yet, mathematically, it is not the same universe. A tiny fluctuation here, a subtle decay there, a microscopic rearrangement of quantum fields that will never accumulate into anything larger. These changes are not meaningful. They are not narratable. They do not form stories. But they are enough. Time only requires that one state differ from the next by anything at all, no matter how small. And in the deepest future, that anything approaches zero but never quite reaches it. This is the quiet conflict at the center of cosmic persistence. We expect time to end when events end. The universe refuses. One of the reasons this feels wrong is that we confuse time with relevance. We assume that if nothing matters, nothing should continue. But relevance is not a physical property. It is a judgment layered on top of existence by minds that evolved to care. The universe never learned to care. When physicists describe the future after heat death, they do not speak of a frozen moment. They speak of asymptotes, of limits approached but never reached, of motion slowed until it becomes almost imperceptible but not erased. There is no final frame where the universe settles and time halts. There is only an endless series of nearly identical frames, stretching forward, without climax, without resolution. This means that time does not end in silence. It becomes silence. And silence, once established, does not break itself. Another uncomfortable thought follows naturally from this. If time continues without events, then events were never the engine of time. They were passengers, stars burning, galaxies forming, life emerging, minds thinking, civilizations rising and falling. These were localized disturbances, temporary concentrations of activity within a much larger, quieter flow. The flow did not exist because of them. They existed because of the flow. In this sense, heat death does not kill time. It removes the distractions that once made time feel alive. What remains is time in its most stripped form, sequence without story. There is something profoundly alien about this idea. Human consciousness is built around contrast. We need before and after to feel meaning. We need difference to feel motion. When difference collapses, our intuition tells us that reality itself should collapse. But the universe is under no obligation to satisfy intuition. Time, as described by modern physics, is not something that needs to be powered. It is not a process that runs out of fuel. As long as space-time exists, temporal ordering exists. And as far as we can tell, space-time is extraordinarily resilient. Even the most violent cosmic events, Big Bangs, cosmic inflation, black hole evaporation, do not eliminate space-time. They reshape it, stretch it, thin it, but they do not erase it. So when the universe becomes empty and cold and uniform, space-time remains as a kind of scaffolding, a silent framework within which moments continue to succeed one another. No audience, no record, no awareness, just continuation. At this point, many people instinctively ask a question that feels obvious. What's the point? But this question reveals more about us than about the universe. Point implies intention. It implies design. It implies a system built toward a goal. The universe, as far as we can observe, does not operate that way. It has no endpoint written into its laws, no final condition it is striving to reach. Heat death is not a goal. It is simply where the rules lead. And once there, the rules do not suddenly change their minds. Time keeps flowing because nothing in the equations instructs it to stop. This is where our need for narrative becomes a liability. We are story-making creatures. We want arcs. We want closure. We want the last page to mean something. The universe does not promise closure. It offers endurance. And endurance without purpose feels unsettling, because it mirrors a fear we rarely articulate, the fear that continuation itself might not justify meaning. If the universe can persist forever without caring, then meaning was never guaranteed by duration. Long existence does not imply importance. Infinite time does not imply fulfillment. Meaning, it seems, was something that appeared briefly when conditions allowed and then vanished again. That does not make it false. It makes it fragile. In the heat-dead future, time becomes a vast, empty corridor. Not dramatic, not threatening, just endless. A hallway without doors, without windows, without destination. We are tempted to imagine that such a corridor is pointless. But pointlessness is not a physical condition. It is an emotional response to the absence of familiar landmarks. From the universe's perspective, nothing is missing. The corridor is doing exactly what corridors do. And here, quietly, a deeper question begins to take shape, not shouted, not urgent, but persistent in its own way. If time does not need events, and existence does not need experience, then perhaps the universe was never meant to feel alive. Perhaps life was the exception, not the rule. A brief warming, a temporary imbalance, a moment when matter forgot how to be quiet. And as that moment fades, the universe does not react. It does not mourn. It does not reset. It simply continues doing what it always did long before minds existed, and long after they are gone. This realization does not arrive like a revelation. It settles slowly, like darkness spreading evenly across a landscape once lit by scattered fires. And as those fires go out, one by one, time does not pause to notice. It keeps going, which leads us gently, inevitably, toward the next unsettling idea. If time can continue without events, then existence itself may not need life at all. There is a quiet assumption hidden deep inside the way we think about existence. An assumption so familiar that we rarely notice it, that to exist, something must in some way live. Not biologically, perhaps, but actively, dynamically, with motion, intention, or at least interaction. We imagine existence as something animated, something that does, reacts, responds. And when animation disappears, we instinctively expect existence to follow it into silence. But the universe does not agree. Long after the last star has burned its fuel, long after the final atoms have been torn apart or diluted beyond recognition, the universe remains. Not alive, not awake, not even dormant, simply present. This is the strange truth that begins to surface once we move past the comfort of time continuing without events. The universe does not need to live in order to exist. Life was never a requirement. It was a condition temporary, local, and fragile. In the heat-dead future, nothing qualifies as alive by any definition we recognize. There are no self-sustaining systems, no metabolism, no replication, no boundaries between inside and outside. Matter is spread too thin, energy too evenly distributed, complexity too eroded. And yet, the universe is still there. This feels wrong because we are products of life. Everything we value, memory, awareness, purpose, emerges from living systems. So we subconsciously project those values backward, onto the cosmos itself. We imagine the universe as something that once came alive, that might someday die. But those words belong to us, not to physics. From the universe's perspective, life was an interruption. For most of cosmic history, there was no life. And for almost all of its future, there will be no life again. The era of living systems occupies a narrow band of time, squeezed between an unimaginably hot beginning and an unimaginably cold aftermath. If you zoom out far enough, life looks less like a destiny and more like a flicker. This realization creates a subtle conflict, because if the universe can exist without life, then life was never its purpose. Consciousness was never its goal. Awareness was never the point toward which everything was moving. They happened, but they were not required. In the far future, the universe does not grieve their absence. It does not register loss. There is no cosmic loneliness, no sense of abandonment, no awareness that something precious has vanished. Loneliness requires a mind. The universe has none. This is difficult to accept because we often treat existence as something that must be justified by experience. We ask, what is the value of a universe no one experiences? What does it mean for something to exist if there is no one left to notice it? But again, these questions assume that meaning is a prerequisite for reality. Physics makes no such demand. Existence, at its most basic level, is not experiential. It does not require sensation or awareness. It does not require observers. It only requires that the conditions allowing it to persist are not violated. In a heat-dead universe, those conditions remain intact. Space-time does not collapse simply because it has become empty. Quantum fields do not vanish because no one is measuring them. The fundamental structure of reality does not dissolve because it no longer supports life. Life depended on the universe. The universe never depended on life. This inversion is unsettling because it removes us from the center of the story. It suggests that the most familiar phase of existence, the one filled with stars, planets, chemistry, and thought, was not the universe reaching its full expression. It was the universe briefly forgetting how to be simple. Complexity, from this perspective, is not the default. It is a deviation, a temporary state, sustained by energy gradients that cannot last forever. When those gradients flatten, complexity drains away, not violently, not dramatically, but quietly. Systems that once maintained themselves lose the ability to do so. Boundaries blur, structures unravel. What remains is not death, but neutrality. The universe becomes something closer to a background than a participant. And this background does not need to do anything to remain real. This is where language begins to betray us. We use words like still, remaining, continuing, as if the universe were choosing to persist, as if it were resisting an urge to stop. But there is no urge. There is no effort involved in continuation. Stopping would require a mechanism, a rule, a condition that says, at this point, existence must end. No such condition appears in our best theories. Nothing in the known laws of physics instructs the universe to shut itself off once life disappears. So the universe does what it has always done. It obeys the rules that define it, and those rules do not care whether anything is alive. This leads to a deeper, quieter discomfort, because if the universe does not need to be alive, then life was never a necessary chapter. It was optional, contingent, dependent on circumstances that could easily have failed to arise. The cosmos could have remained sterile forever, and it would have been no less real. This does not mean life was meaningless. It means meaning was local, temporary, generated within a narrow window of conditions that allowed matter to reflect on itself. Meaning did not radiate outward to define the universe. It flickered inward, within small pockets of complexity. And when those pockets disappear, the universe does not notice. There is something profoundly alien about a reality that does not register its own silence. We imagine emptiness as absence, as loss. But for the universe, emptiness is just another configuration, a simpler one. In the far future, there is no struggle to maintain existence, no effort to survive. Survival is not a concept that applies. There is nothing threatening the universe, nothing opposing it, nothing waiting to replace it. There is only continuation. This is why heat death is often misunderstood as a tragic ending. We frame it as a catastrophe because it removes everything we care about. But from a cosmic standpoint, heat death is not a failure. It is equilibrium. The universe does not collapse into nothingness. It relaxes into stillness. And stillness, unlike death, has no final moment. It just is. At this stage, it becomes tempting to anthropomorphize the universe, to imagine it as a body that has lost consciousness, or a machine running without a purpose. But even these metaphors smuggle in assumptions. Machines are built for tasks. Bodies evolved to survive. The universe did neither. It is not broken when it becomes lifeless. It is not incomplete. It has not failed to fulfill a role. It is simply in a different state. A state in which the properties that once allowed life to emerge are no longer present, but the underlying fabric remains untouched. This reframes life not as the culmination of cosmic history, but as a brief phase transition, a temporary arrangement of matter and energy that arose under specific conditions and vanished when those conditions faded. The universe did not lose life. Life expired, and the universe carried on, unaffected. This realization can feel cold, even nihilistic, but it also carries a strange clarity. It separates existence from experience, persistence from purpose. It tells us that being is more fundamental than feeling. And as unsettling as that may be, it opens the door to a deeper understanding of why the universe does not end when life does. Because ending would require intention, and the universe has none. It does not choose to exist. It simply has no reason not to. As we sit with this thought, the image of a vast, lifeless cosmos continuing indefinitely, we begin to sense the next layer of strangeness waiting beneath it. If the universe does not need to be alive, if it does not need observers, if it does not need experience at all, then perhaps the most puzzling thing is not that it continues, but that it ever felt alive in the first place. There is a question that keeps returning whenever the universe becomes too quiet, not shouted, not urgent, just persistent. What is the point of continuing when nothing new will ever happen again? We ask this question because we cannot separate continuation from intention. In human life, things continue for reasons. A heart keeps beating to sustain a body. A story keeps moving to reach an ending. A civilization keeps building toward a future it imagines. Continuation, to us, is always tethered to purpose. But the universe does not share this habit. In the long aftermath of heat death, there is no destination waiting ahead, no condition the universe is trying to fulfill, no final state it is hoping to arrive at. The state it reaches is already stable, already balanced, already complete by physical standards. And still, it goes on. This is where the discomfort sharpens. Because if continuation does not require purpose, then purpose was never the engine of existence. It was an interpretation layered on top of something far more indifferent. We often talk about the universe as if it were doing something, expanding, cooling, evolving. But these verbs hide a subtle mistake. They imply agency. They suggest motion guided by intent. In reality, the universe is not trying to achieve heat death. Heat death is simply what happens when energy differences are allowed to flatten without interference. Once that flattening is complete, nothing in the laws of physics instructs the universe to stop existing. There is no clause that says, if no further work can be done, terminate reality. So the universe remains in that state not as a waiting room, not as a pause before something else, but as a long, unbroken continuation with no narrative pressure behind it. This idea feels deeply unsatisfying to the human mind. We are story-bound creatures. We believe that duration must justify itself through progress, improvement, or at least variation. When nothing changes, we interpret it as stagnation. When stagnation persists, we call it meaningless. But meaninglessness is not a physical failure. It is a psychological reaction. The universe does not experience boredom. It does not suffer from monotony. It does not crave novelty. These are emotions that arise from nervous systems evolved to detect change, because change once meant survival or death. In the heat-dead future, there are no nervous systems left, so there is no one left to be disappointed by endless sameness. This reveals something quietly profound. Purpose is not required for continuation. Purpose is something minds invent to cope with finitude. It gives shape to short lives, limited resources, and irreversible losses. The universe has none of these constraints. It does not need to rush. It does not need to optimize. It does not need to arrive. Continuation, for the universe, is effortless. We tend to imagine that things require energy to keep going, that without input, systems decay, stop, or collapse. This is true for localized structures, stars, organisms, machines. They depend on gradients, on imbalances, on fuel. But the universe as a whole is not a localized structure. It does not run out of anything because there is nothing outside it that could deprive it of resources. There is no external environment draining it, no opposing force wearing it down. Once the universe reaches equilibrium, it no longer does anything, but it also no longer needs to do anything. Equilibrium is not a prelude to disappearance. It is a stable condition, and stability does not imply termination. This is where many people instinctively imagine some deeper reason must exist. Perhaps a hidden purpose. Perhaps a cosmic intention we have not yet uncovered. Perhaps the universe continues because it is meant to. But this instinct reflects our discomfort more than any physical necessity. Physics does not point to hidden intentions behind persistence. It points to the absence of mechanisms for ending. Continuation is not chosen, it is allowed. As long as nothing forbids existence, existence remains. This is a subtle but important shift. We often frame reality as something that must be sustained by effort. In truth, stopping would require effort. Ending would require a rule that says, this cannot continue. No such rule has been found. So the universe does not end when purpose evaporates. Purpose evaporates because it was never universal. It was local. For a brief stretch of time, matter arranged itself into beings who asked, why? who wondered about meaning, who felt uneasy about the idea of endless continuation without narrative payoff. Those beings, us, projected our need for purpose onto the cosmos and mistook it for a cosmic property. Heat death peels that projection away. It reveals a universe that does not care whether its continuation is meaningful. It does not measure its own existence against ideals of fulfillment or progress. It simply persists. This realization can feel bleak, but it also carries a strange calm. It suggests that the universe is not haunted by its own future. It does not dread emptiness. It does not anticipate loss. Loss requires memory. The universe has none. In the far future, there is no regret that things were once more interesting, no awareness that complexity has drained away, no sadness that stars once burned and no longer do. Sadness belongs to creatures who remember. The universe does not remember. This brings us to an unsettling inversion of how we usually think about value. We tend to believe that things are valuable because they last, that endurance grants importance, that permanence is a kind of validation. But the universe shows us something different. It lasts forever and assigns no value to that fact. Duration alone does not generate meaning. Infinite continuation does not imply significance. The universe's persistence is not a triumph. It is not an achievement. It is neutral. This neutrality is difficult to sit with because it removes the comforting idea that existence must justify itself, that reality means something because it exists. Heat death suggests the opposite. Existence does not explain itself. It does not answer questions. It does not reassure. It simply is. And here, quietly, another layer of the conflict emerges. If the universe can continue without purpose, and if purpose was something that arose briefly within it, then purpose was never guaranteed by existence. It was borrowed, a temporary lens through which a small part of the universe looked at itself. This does not make purpose false. It makes it fragile, context-dependent, finite, and perhaps that fragility is why we cling to it so fiercely. Because in a universe that does not promise meaning, meaning becomes something that must be generated locally or not at all. The universe does not promise to carry it forward. When life ends, purpose ends with it. The universe does not replace it. It does not compensate. It does not adapt. It simply continues without it. This thought does not arrive with a conclusion. It does not offer comfort or despair. It simply sits there, like a wide, empty plain stretching in all directions. Continuation without purpose. Existence without explanation. A universe that does not ask why it goes on because it never learned to ask in the first place. And as this idea settles, slowly and evenly, another question begins to surface. Not about purpose, but about necessity. If the universe does not continue for anything, then what, if anything, could ever make it stop? At first, entropy feels like an enemy. It is the word we use to explain why things fall apart, why structures decay, why order erodes, why nothing we build ever stays the same. In everyday life, entropy feels like loss, like a slow, unavoidable drift toward disorder. But this feeling comes from living inside a universe where entropy is still in motion. In the far future, entropy is no longer something that grows. It no longer advances. It no longer competes with order. It wins completely. And when it does, something unexpected happens. The struggle ends. Entropy, in its final form, is not chaotic. It is calm. In a heat-dead universe, entropy has reached its maximum. Energy is spread as evenly as possible. No gradients remain. No pockets of higher order exist to be dissolved. No structures stand in defiance of equilibrium. Everything that could fall apart already has. And so entropy stops behaving like a force. It becomes a condition. This is a subtle shift, but a crucial one. While entropy is increasing, the universe feels dynamic. Processes occur. Systems decay. Change has direction. There is a before and an after that matters. But once entropy reaches its ceiling, direction disappears. Nothing is being lost anymore. Nothing is being gained. Nothing is being competed for. The universe is no longer moving toward disorder. It is disorder perfectly balanced, perfectly even, perfectly indifferent. And this is where many intuitions break down. We imagine maximum entropy as chaos, as noise, as randomness exploding in every direction. But true maximum entropy is not loud. It is uniform. Chaos, as we usually picture it, requires contrast. It requires differences in energy, in structure, in motion. Once those differences vanish, chaos has nothing left to express. The universe becomes smooth, so smooth that almost nothing can be said about it. In this state, time does not carry tension. There is no arrow pushing events from one meaningful configuration to another. The arrow of time, the idea that time has a preferred direction because entropy increases, loses its bite. Time still exists. Sequence still exists. But direction becomes irrelevant. Moments follow moments, but they do not lead anywhere. This is deeply unsettling because so much of our understanding of reality is built on contrast. We understand motion because we see change. We understand progress because we see difference. When difference collapses, understanding collapses with it. The universe does not. It continues, quietly, inside a state where entropy no longer has work to do. This is the conflict hidden inside the idea of heat death. We imagine it as a catastrophic ending because we associate entropy with destruction. But destruction implies that something is actively being taken away. At maximum entropy, nothing is being taken. There is nothing left to remove. From the universe's perspective, this is not a crisis. It is stability. And stability, once achieved, does not require maintenance. This raises an uncomfortable realization. Much of what we think of as happening in the universe was actually entropy, not yet finished. Stars burning, galaxies forming, life evolving. These were all consequences of uneven energy distribution, temporary imbalances that allowed complexity to emerge. But complexity was never the baseline. It was a delay. Entropy was always moving toward a state where complexity could no longer be sustained. Not out of malice, not out of intent, simply because that is how energy behaves when left alone. When that process completes, the universe does not mourn the loss of complexity. It rests. And rest, in this context, is not death. It is the absence of struggle. In a maximum entropy universe, nothing is trying to become something else. There is no pressure, no incentive, no tension. Explosions require imbalance. Motion requires difference. Change requires gradients. Remove gradients, and change loses its engine. Yet time remains. This is the quiet paradox at the heart of entropy's victory. Even when the arrow of time loses its meaning, time itself does not disappear. The coordinate still advances. States still succeed one another. They just look almost exactly the same. The universe becomes a long sequence of near-identical moments, each one technically distinct, but practically indistinguishable. Entropy, having completed its work, no longer gives time a narrative. And without narrative, time becomes difficult to recognize. This is why the far future feels unreal to us. Our minds evolved to operate in environments where entropy was incomplete, where gradients were abundant, where actions mattered. We are not built to imagine a reality where nothing meaningful can happen anymore. But physics insists that such a reality is not only possible, it is likely. And once there, entropy does not reverse. It does not oscillate. It does not reset the universe for another round. Maximum entropy is not a turning point. It is a plateau that stretches indefinitely forward. This removes another comforting illusion, that endings imply renewal, that after collapse, something new must emerge, that the universe, like a story, must cycle through phases of tension and release. Entropy does not promise cycles. It promises flattening, and once flattened, nothing in the known laws of physics compels the universe to unflatten itself. The result is a universe that has become thermodynamically silent, not empty in the sense of nothingness, but empty of opportunity. There is energy everywhere, but it cannot be used. Matter exists, but it cannot organize. Time flows, but it carries nothing forward. In this sense, heat death is not the universe shutting down. It is the universe running out of things to do, and still, it exists. This brings us to a deeper layer of discomfort. If entropy can reach a state where it no longer matters, then much of what we considered history was just entropy on its way to completion. The grand dramas of cosmic evolution, the birth of stars, the formation of planets, the emergence of life, were not goals. They were side effects of imbalance. When imbalance ends, drama ends. What remains is not tragedy. It is neutrality. And neutrality, unlike chaos, is stable. There is no mechanism within a maximum entropy universe to spontaneously generate large-scale structure again. Fluctuations occur, but they are fleeting. They do not accumulate. They do not cascade into something larger. Entropy, once victorious, does not loosen its grip. This means that the future of the universe is not one of recurring events, but of enduring sameness. A sameness so complete that it erases the conditions required for meaning as we understand it. Meaning requires stakes. Stakes require difference. Difference requires gradients. Entropy removes gradients. And so meaning fades not abruptly, not violently, but gently, as a consequence of equilibrium. The universe does not resist this fading. It does not compensate. It does not replace meaning with something else. It allows it to dissolve. This realization reframes the entire cosmic story. What we thought was the main act may have been a brief deviation from a far longer stillness. What felt central may have been peripheral. What felt eternal may have been temporary. Entropy does not destroy the universe. It simplifies it, and in that simplified state, the universe continues, not because it must, not because it wants to, but because nothing prevents it from doing so. As this idea settles, another quiet question emerges, one that does not ask about purpose or life, but about identity. If the universe becomes almost perfectly uniform, if one moment is indistinguishable from the next, then in what sense is the universe still the same universe? And how many moments can pass before sameness itself becomes the dominant feature of reality? That question waits patiently, suspended in the stillness, as we drift onward, deeper into the silence. In the far future of the universe, difference becomes rare, not gone, not erased, just insufficient. This is one of the most difficult ideas to hold on to, because our minds are trained to believe that as long as something changes, reality is still active. That as long as there is any motion at all, the universe is still doing something meaningful. But meaning does not arise from change alone. It arises from change that accumulates. In a heat-dead universe, changes still occur, but they do not build. They do not reinforce one another. They do not cascade into larger patterns. Each fluctuation appears, dissolves, and leaves no trace behind. Difference exists, but difference no longer matters. Imagine standing in an endless desert where the wind rearranges grains of sand by fractions of a millimeter. The surface technically changes every second. No two moments are identical. And yet, if you step back far enough, the landscape never becomes something new. There is motion without consequence. This is the state the universe drifts into once entropy has finished its work. The fundamental fields of reality continue to fluctuate. Quantum uncertainty never fully disappears. But those fluctuations are too small, too isolated, too evenly distributed to give rise to structure. Nothing links them together. Nothing remembers them. Nothing grows from them. So the universe becomes a place where change has lost its ability to matter. This introduces a strange tension between physics and intuition. Physics insists that the universe is not static. Intuition insists that if nothing meaningful changes, then stasis has been reached. Both are correct, depending on scale. At the smallest levels, the universe never becomes perfectly still. Absolute stillness would violate quantum mechanics itself. There will always be some residual motion, some background activity, some trembling at the foundation of reality, but this motion is no longer creative. It is noise without signal, and signal is what once made the universe feel alive. Stars mattered because their birth and death reshaped galaxies. Galaxies mattered because their motion sculpted cosmic structure. Life mattered because it could influence its environment, remember the past, and shape the future. In the heat-dead universe, nothing has that power anymore. Changes occur, but they cancel out. Differences arise, but they dissolve before interacting. Time advances, but it carries no momentum. The universe enters a regime where distinction becomes informationally irrelevant. This is a subtle but devastating shift, because meaning, at its core, depends on the ability to distinguish one state from another in a way that affects what comes next. Meaning requires consequences. In a universe where consequences evaporate, meaning has no foothold, and yet the universe remains. We often think of existence as something that must justify itself through significance. But here, we encounter a form of existence that persists without significance, without accumulation, without memory. This is where sameness becomes dominant, not as an absolute identity between moments, but as a practical indistinguishability. From any meaningful distance, one moment of the universe looks exactly like the next. Not because nothing changes, but because nothing that changes is strong enough to leave a mark. This is deeply unsettling because it challenges a hidden assumption that difference alone is enough to sustain reality as something recognizable. It is not. Difference must matter, and in the far future, it does not. The universe does not collapse into nothingness when difference loses significance. It simply becomes uninteresting, not to itself, but to any hypothetical observer who might imagine looking at it. But there are no observers left, and that absence matters, because observation is one of the few processes that can amplify difference. Observers record, compare, react. They turn tiny variations into memory, into history, into narrative. Without observers, differences remain isolated. They flicker and vanish. This is why the universe after heat death is not chaotic in the way we fear. Chaos still produces patterns. Chaos still creates contrast. Chaos still allows surprises. Maximum entropy does not. It produces monotony so complete that surprise itself becomes impossible. Nothing unexpected can happen, not because the universe is constrained, but because there is nothing left for expectation to operate on. This brings us to a quiet realization. The universe does not need to be eventful to continue, but it did need events for us to exist. We were born into a universe rich in gradients, hot stars against cold space, dense matter against emptiness, past against future. Those gradients created consequences. Consequences created stories. Stories created meaning. Once gradients vanish, stories end. Not with a final chapter, but with silence. And silence, unlike endings, does not announce itself. It simply spreads. This raises a question that feels almost uncomfortable to ask. If the future of the universe contains infinite time, but no meaningful difference, then in what sense does that future exist at all? From a physical standpoint, the answer is straightforward. It exists because space-time exists. Fields exist, and nothing prohibits their continuation. From a human standpoint, the answer feels hollow. Existence without distinction feels like a contradiction. But this contradiction only exists inside minds that evolve to value distinction. The universe does not share that value system. It does not rank moments by importance. It does not privilege novelty over repetition. It does not measure existence by interest. The future does not need to be different to be real. This is where our language begins to fail us. Words like nothing happens suggest emptiness, absence, non-being. But what actually exists is something more subtle and more alien. A state where things happen, but nothing changes. A state where motion continues, but no direction emerges. A state where time advances, but history cannot form. The universe does not turn off. It becomes forgettable, not to itself, but to any framework that once relied on difference to make sense of reality. This idea reframes heat death yet again. It is not the universe becoming nothing. It is the universe becoming everything it can be: uniform, balanced, resolved. There is no tension left to release, no contrast left to exploit, no future left to unfold in any meaningful way. And still, the universe remains. This persistence without distinction creates a strange asymmetry between past and future. The past was rich, layered, eventful. The future is flat, smooth, almost featureless. But both are equally real. This challenges another deep assumption that reality must be symmetric in interest, that the future must somehow pay off the complexity of the past. The universe makes no such promise. It does not compensate for its early abundance with later significance. It simply allows one phase to give way to another. Complexity was temporary. Sameness is durable. This does not mean the universe prefers sameness. Preference implies evaluation. It implies a point of view. The universe has none. Sameness is simply what remains when all processes that generate difference have exhausted themselves. And that remainder is vast, almost infinite. As we sit with this image, a universe where moments blur into one another, where difference flickers but never accumulates, we begin to sense the next layer of strangeness waiting beneath it. If the universe becomes a place where nothing is different enough to matter, if time continues but history cannot form, then perhaps the deepest question is not why the universe continues, but why, for a brief moment, it ever allowed difference to matter at all. There is a final assumption that quietly dissolves once difference no longer matters. That existence needs to be seen. For most of human history, we have treated observation as something close to sacred. To be witnessed is to be real. To be remembered is to matter. To be seen is to be validated. Entire cultures, entire lives, entire fears are built around the idea that something only truly exists when it leaves an impression on a mind. But the universe does not require witnesses. In the far future, there's no one left to look. No eyes, no instruments, no memories, new questions. And yet, the universe remains exactly as real as it ever was. This is perhaps the most difficult threshold to cross, because it strips away the last comfort. We tend to cling to the idea that awareness itself anchors reality, that without observation, existence somehow weakens, fades, or collapses into abstraction. But physics offers no such reassurance. Long after the final conscious system has dissolved, space-time does not hesitate. Fields do not pause. The structure of reality does not flicker uncertainly, waiting for validation. It continues in complete indifference to whether it is noticed. This challenges a deeply ingrained intuition. We often imagine observation as something fundamental, even mystical. We hear phrases like, the universe observing itself, or consciousness giving meaning to reality. And they feel right because they place us back at the center of the picture. Heat death removes that center. It reveals a universe that does not require reflection to persist. This is not to say that observation never mattered. During the era of life, observation played a powerful role. Measuring, recording, responding. These processes amplified small differences into lasting consequences. Observers created history. They turned fleeting events into narratives that could shape the future. But observers were participants, not pillars. When they disappear, reality does not wobble. It simply becomes quieter. In the heat-dead universe, there is no frame of reference that privileges one moment over another, no perspective from which the universe appears empty or full. no awareness to judge stillness as boring or terrifying. The universe does not experience the absence of witnesses as loss. Loss is a psychological concept. It requires attachment. The universe has none. This realization forces us to confront how much of our understanding of existence has been built around our own presence. We assume that reality should, in some sense, acknowledge us, that the universe should register when its observers vanish. It does not. From a physical standpoint, observers are just another configuration of matter and energy. When that configuration can no longer be sustained, it fades away like any other structure. That entropy erodes. The universe does not pause to notice. This is not cruelty. It is neutrality. The idea of a universe without witnesses feels unsettling because it exposes a gap between reality and significance. Significance requires someone to care. Reality does not. In the far future, the universe exists in a state where nothing is being interpreted. Nothing is being framed. Nothing is being understood. But understanding was never a prerequisite. We often talk about reality as something that appears, but appearance implies an observer. In a witnessless universe, nothing appears or disappears. It simply is. This brings us to a subtle shift in perspective. Perhaps observation was never the foundation of existence. Perhaps it was a temporary phenomenon, an emergent layer that arose when conditions allowed matter to form complex, self-referential systems. When those systems dissolve, the layer peels away. What remains is not incomplete. It is exposed. This exposure feels alien because it removes the narrative we have always placed ourselves inside. A story where the universe unfolds, becomes aware, and then somehow acknowledges that awareness. But the heat-dead future suggests a different structure entirely. The universe unfolds. Awareness briefly emerges. Awareness disappears. The universe continues. No feedback loop, no cosmic reflection, just a brief asymmetry that closes itself. In this sense, observers are like condensation forming on a cold surface. Under the right conditions, patterns appear. They shimmer for a while. Then the temperature changes, and the surface returns to uniformity. The surface does not remember the patterns. It does not miss them. They were never essential. This does not diminish the richness of conscious experience while it exists. It only places it in context. Awareness was not the universe's goal, it was one of its possible states. And possible states, once left behind, do not leave scars. This idea also reframes a long-standing philosophical tension, the fear that a universe without observers is meaningless. Meaninglessness, in this sense, is not a flaw. It is the default. Meaning emerges when minds exist to generate it. When minds disappear, meaning does not linger in the background like a residual glow. It goes with them. The universe does not store meaning for later retrieval. This is why the future after heat death feels so stark. It is not just empty of life, it is empty of interpretation. Nothing is being evaluated. Nothing is being compared. Nothing is being valued. And yet, nothing is missing. From the universe's own perspective, if such a perspective could even be said to exist, there is no deficiency, no lack, no hole left behind by vanished observers. There is only a simpler configuration. This simplicity is not dramatic. It does not announce itself as a revelation. It does not arrive with a sense of finality. It just settles in. This leads us to a difficult but clarifying thought. Perhaps the universe never needed witnesses to justify its existence. Perhaps existence was never contingent on being seen. We wanted it to be, because being seen mattered to us. But the universe does not operate on human terms. This realization can feel cold, but it can also feel strangely liberating. It releases existence from the burden of needing to perform, of needing to impress, of needing to culminate in awareness. The universe does not have to mean anything to continue, and it does not have to be noticed to be real. In the heat-dead future, there is no tragedy in the absence of witnesses. Tragedy requires someone to feel loss. there is no one left. The universe is not lonely. Loneliness required desire for connection. The universe does not desire. This absence of desire is what allows it to continue without tension, without longing, without dissatisfaction. It is not waiting for observers to return. It is not holding space for meaning to reappear. It is complete as it is. And here, as we let go of the idea that existence needs witnesses, another question begins to surface, quieter than the rest, but more unsettling in its implications. If the universe does not need to be seen, if it does not need to be experienced, then perhaps existence itself does not require participation. Perhaps reality can persist in a state where nothing is involved in it at all. And if that is true, then the deepest mystery is no longer why the universe continues, but why, for a brief and fragile moment, it allowed participation to exist in the first place. There is a final layer of detachment that reveals itself once witnesses are gone. Not just unseen, not just uninterpreted, but unexperienced. Because even without observers, we often imagine that existence must still, in some sense, feel like something. That reality, at the very least, carries an inner texture, a silent presence, a background sensation, a kind of cosmic awareness without a mind. But experience does not linger when experiencers disappear. In the far future of the universe, nothing experiences being there. This idea is harder to grasp than emptiness or silence, because experience is the lens through which we have understood everything. We do not merely observe the world, we feel ourselves existing within it. Presence, to us, is inseparable from sensation. Yet sensation is not fundamental. It is constructed. Experience arises only when matter is arranged in very specific ways, ways that allow information to be processed, compared, integrated, and remembered. Brains do this. Nervous systems do this. Conscious systems do this. Space-time does not. Quantum fields do not. The universe, at its foundation, does not feel itself unfolding. So when the last conscious systems dissolve, experience vanishes completely, not muted, not dimmed, gone. And the universe does not notice the loss, because noticing is itself an experience. This is the point where language begins to fail us. We are tempted to describe the future universe as empty, dark, or cold, but all of these words imply sensation. Darkness requires sight. Cold requires touch. Emptiness requires expectation. In a universe without experience, none of these apply. There is no darkness, only the absence of light detection. There is no cold, only low energy states. There is no emptiness, only low-density configurations. What remains is existence without any inner dimension. This challenges a deeply rooted intuition that existence must be accompanied by experience in order to be real. But experience is not a property of reality as a whole. It is a local phenomenon, a brief arrangement of matter that creates an inner point of view. When that arrangement collapses, the point of view collapses with it. The universe does not inherit it. In the heat-dead future, there is no one left to be bored by eternity. No one left to feel the drag of infinite time. No one left to feel trapped in monotony. Those feelings require consciousness. Without consciousness, infinite time is not endured. It simply exists. This is a subtle but profound shift. We often project our discomfort with endlessness onto the universe itself. We imagine that a future with nothing happening must be unbearable. But unbearable to whom? Suffering requires sensation. Sensation requires a nervous system. The universe has neither. So the future is not bleak in the way we fear. It is neutral beyond feeling. This neutrality dismantles another illusion. That experience is woven into the fabric of reality. It is not. Experience is something that briefly happened within reality. For a short time, matter learned how to fold back on itself, how to create feedback loops complex enough to generate awareness, how to produce an inner world alongside the outer one. That inner world felt central while it existed, but it was never foundational. The universe does not collapse into a dreamless void when experience disappears. It does not lose a dimension. It does not become incomplete. It simply sheds a layer that was never required. This raises an unsettling comparison. Think of a fire burning in an empty field. While it burns, it produces light and heat. It transforms its surroundings. It draws attention. But when the fuel is gone, the fire does not leave behind fireness as a property of the field. The field remains. Conscious experience is similar. While it exists, it dominates perception. It feels like the core of reality. But when the conditions that sustain it vanish, experience leaves no residue in the universe itself. No echo, no afterimage, no memory. The universe does not replay consciousness. This idea can feel disorienting because it undermines the sense that experience grants permanence. We like to believe that feeling something makes it matter on a cosmic scale. That awareness elevates events beyond mere physical processes. But awareness does not persist beyond its physical substrate. When the substrate dissolves, experience dissolves with it, and the universe does not keep a record. This is not because the universe is cruel or dismissive. It is because the universe does not have a storage mechanism for experience. Memory exists only within systems capable of encoding it. Once those systems are gone, memory vanishes. This reframes the relationship between experience and existence. Experience was not something the universe was moving toward. It was not the culmination of cosmic evolution. It was a phase, a rare and fragile one. And like all phases, it ended when the conditions that sustained it could no longer be maintained. The heat-dead universe is not haunted by the absence of experience. Haunting requires awareness. It is not empty in the emotional sense, because emotions are not there to register emptiness. It is simply configured in a way that no longer allows experience to arise. This leads to a quietly radical conclusion. Existence does not need to be felt in order to be complete. We often think of reality as something that gains fullness through experience. But from a physical standpoint, experience adds complexity, not completeness. The universe without experience is simpler, not lacking. This simplicity feels wrong to us because we are creatures of experience. We evaluate reality based on how it feels. When feeling disappears, we interpret it as loss. But loss is an experiential judgment. The universe does not make judgments. In the far future, there is no inside and outside in the way consciousness creates them. No inner narrative, no sense of presence. Reality exists only as structure and relation fields, space-time, energy distributions. No one is home. And this absence of an inner world does something profound to the concept of time. Time, without experience, does not pass. It does not drag. It does not accelerate. It simply orders states. Without experience, time has no texture, no rhythm, no sense of duration. 1 billion years and a single second are equally unexperienced. They are just coordinates. This dissolves another human fear, the fear of eternal waiting. Waiting requires anticipation. Anticipation requires awareness of the future. In a universe without experience, nothing waits, nothing hopes, nothing expects, nothing endures. Eternity, in this context, is not long. It is empty of length. This is perhaps the most alien idea of all. A future that is infinite, yet not experienced as infinite. A duration that stretches forever, yet is not felt as a burden. We cannot imagine this directly, because imagination itself is an experience, but we can gesture toward it. The universe after heat death does not suffer from its own continuation. It does not grow tired of existing. It does not crave an ending. Those are human reactions to time. The universe has none. This reframes the question we began with. Why does the universe continue to exist even when nothing new happens? Perhaps the better question is this: why did we ever assume existence needed to be experienced in order to continue? Experience was never the rule, it was the exception. a brief window during which reality folded inward and felt itself from the inside. When that window closed, existence did not collapse. It simply stopped feeling like anything at all, and yet it remained. This realization does not arrive as a dramatic insight. It settles slowly, like a deep calm. It removes the urgency we often project onto the future, the fear that endless existence must be unbearable. Unbearable to whom? In the far future, there is no one left to bear it. The universe does not endure itself. It simply is. And as we let go of the assumption that existence requires experience, another question drifts into view, soft, distant, and unsettling in a different way. If the universe can exist without being experienced, and without being witnessed, and without having purpose, then perhaps existence itself does not require participation at all. Perhaps reality is something that can continue entirely on its own, without anyone inside it. And if that is true, then the deepest mystery is no longer about the future. It is about the past. Why did participation ever arise? Why did experience appear at all? In a universe that never needed it to begin with, there is one more human habit that quietly dissolves in the far future of the universe. The belief that time leaves traces, that duration accumulates weight, that the longer something exists, the more real it becomes, that persistence itself creates history. But history requires memory, and memory does not survive heat death. In the universe that stretches beyond all events, nothing remembers that anything ever happened, not because memory is erased, but because there is nothing left capable of holding it. This is a subtle but decisive shift. We often imagine the future as something that contains the past, as if time were a vast archive, storing everything that ever occurred, as if the universe somehow carries its own history forward, even when no one is left to read it. But physics offers no such archive. Memory is not a property of time. It is a property of matter, arranged in very specific ways. Neurons, molecules, magnetic domains. Information storage requires structure, energy gradients, and protection from noise. All of these vanish as entropy reaches its maximum. When those structures dissolve, memory dissolves with them. The universe does not keep souvenirs. In the heat-dead future, the past is not hidden, it is gone. This is difficult to accept because we treat the past as something fixed and eternal. We believe that once something happens, it is forever part of reality, that events, having occurred, are somehow preserved in the fabric of existence. But without memory, the past has no physical presence. Space-time does not replay it. Fields do not reference it. The universe does not look back. From the perspective of the far future, there is no record that stars once burned, that galaxies once spun, that life once emerged and asked questions about its own existence. Those events shaped the universe while they were happening, but they do not echo forward indefinitely. They leave no imprint that survives equilibrium. This creates a strange inversion of how we usually think about duration. We assume that the longer something lasts, the more established it becomes. That time grants solidity, that persistence creates significance. But in a universe without memory, duration does not accumulate. 1 billion years passing leaves no more trace than a single second. Time flows, but it does not record. This is where the idea of infinite future becomes less overwhelming. We imagine eternity as an unbearable weight, an endless pile of moments stacked on top of one another. But stacking requires memory. Without memory, moments do not pile up. They slide past one another without leaving residue. The universe does not become heavy with age. It does not grow tired. It does not carry the burden of its own longevity. It simply occupies one state, then another, with no sense of accumulation. This dismantles another quiet fear. The fear that the universe will be trapped in its own endlessness. That infinity itself is a kind of prison. Prisons require awareness of confinement. Without memory, There is no confinement to recognize. The universe is not stuck in time. Time just keeps ordering states. In the heat-dead future, nothing counts how long it has been. There is no internal clock that says, this has gone on long enough. There is no threshold where endurance becomes intolerable. Tolerance is an experience. The universe does not tolerate its existence. It does not experience it. This absence of memory also erases another human concept: legacy. We often find comfort in the idea that something of us will remain, that traces of our actions will persist, that the universe will, in some way, remember we were here. But remembrance requires systems capable of preserving information against entropy. In the long run, entropy wins. All records fade. All inscriptions dissolve. All signals redshift into silence. The universe does not curate its own history. It allows it to vanish. This is not annihilation. It is forgetting without a subject. The future universe is not one that has lost its past. It is one in which the past no longer exists as a physical entity. This challenges the idea that the universe is a timeline with a beginning, middle, and end. Instead, it begins to look more like a sequence of states with no cumulative narrative. The early universe does not sit behind the late universe as a remembered chapter. It is simply no longer there. And yet, this does not make the future unreal. Reality does not require memory. It only requires consistency. As long as the laws of physics remain internally coherent, the universe remains fully real, even if it carries no recollection of how it arrived at its current state. This is deeply counterintuitive because memory is how we make sense of continuity. Without memory, we feel disoriented. We lose identity. We lose meaning. But identity is a construct of memory. The universe does not have one. It does not maintain a sense of self across time. Each moment exists, then gives way to the next, without reference. This means that the universe does not age. Aging implies change relative to a remembered past. Without memory, there is no aging, only succession. The far future is not old. It is simply late. This reframes the notion of the end yet again. The end is not a final chapter remembered forever. It is not a conclusion preserved in cosmic memory. It is a state that arrives and then is forgotten immediately. Not by someone, but by no one. There is something strangely peaceful about this idea. A universe that does not accumulate regret, that does not carry trauma, that does not relive its past. Everything that happens matters only while it is happening. Then it dissolves. This does not diminish the intensity of those moments while they exist. It simply places them within a reality that does not hold on. The universe does not cling. It does not archive. It does not replay. It moves on not consciously, not intentionally, but structurally. Time advances. Memory does not. And as we accept that duration does not create history without memory, another question begins to surface, one that shifts the focus away from time and toward existence itself. If the universe does not remember its past, if it does not experience its present, if it does not anticipate its future, then in what sense is the universe persisting at all? What does continuation mean? When nothing is carried forward? At some point, the idea of continuation begins to hollow out. If nothing is remembered, if nothing is experienced, if nothing accumulates, then what does it even mean to say that the universe persists? We use the word persistence as if it implies endurance, as if something is being held together across time. We imagine a thread that runs from the past through the present and into the future, binding moments into a single, extended existence. But that image depends on carryover, and in the far future of the universe, there is none. Nothing is carried forward except structure. No memory, no meaning, no identity, just consistency. This is where our language begins to mislead us. We say the universe continues, But continuation suggests that something remains the same because of what came before, that the present inherits something from the past. In a heat-dead universe, inheritance disappears. Each moment exists fully on its own terms, governed by the same laws as the moment before it, but not containing it in any meaningful way. The universe does not persist like a story. It persists like a rule. This distinction is subtle, but essential. A story carries forward characters, consequences, arcs. It builds meaning by accumulation. What happened earlier changes what can happen later. A rule does not accumulate. It applies, moment after moment. In the far future, the universe behaves less like a narrative and more like an equation being evaluated over and over again with nearly identical inputs. The output barely changes, and no output is stored. This reframes persistence, not as endurance, but as repetition without memory. The universe is not holding on to itself. It is simply not stopping. Stopping would require a condition that breaks the rules. No such condition appears. So the universe does not persist because it remembers what it was. It persists because nothing interrupts what it is. This idea strips persistence of drama. It is not a triumph. It is not resilience. It is not survival. Survival implies threat. There is no threat. In the heat-dead future, nothing is trying to erase the universe. Nothing is pressing against it, demanding that it justify its existence. Nothing challenges the continuation of space-time or the fields that inhabit it. Persistence is effortless, and effortlessness is what makes it feel so empty to us. We are used to persistence being costly. Lives persist by consuming energy. Structures persist by resisting decay. Meaning persists by being reinforced, remembered, defended. The universe persists by doing nothing. This is a difficult inversion to accept. We expect that if nothing is carried forward, no memory, no experience, no purpose, then existence should somehow fade. But fading is also a process, and processes require gradients. In a universe at equilibrium, even fading has nowhere to go. So existence remains at a kind of baseline, neither intensifying nor diminishing. It simply occupies. This leads to a strange realization. The universe does not persist through time. Time persists through the universe. Space-time is not something the universe moves inside of. It is what the universe is. As long as space-time remains a valid description, temporal succession remains valid. The universe does not need to carry anything forward for time to keep ordering states. Each state replaces the previous one without inheriting it. No continuity of content, only continuity of form. This makes persistence feel almost meaningless to us because we associate continuity with identity. We believe that something is the same thing over time because it retains properties, memories, or structures. But in the far future, identity dissolves. There is no same universe in the narrative sense. There is only a universe described by the same equations at different coordinates along time. Sameness becomes mathematical, not historical. This challenges the idea that existence has a center or a core that persists across time. There is no cosmic self being maintained, no essence being preserved, just a framework that does not collapse. This framework does not care whether it has existed for 10 billion years or 10 trillion years. Duration does not accumulate weight. It does not thicken reality. Without memory, the universe does not become more established the longer it exists. It does not become more fragile either. It is indifferent to its own age. This indifference removes another layer of anxiety we often project onto the future. We imagine that infinite time must eventually lead to instability, that something must break simply because it has gone on for too long. But too long is a concept rooted in fatigue, decay, and tolerance. The universe does not fatigue. Its laws do not wear out. They do not get tired of being applied. As far as we can tell, the rules governing space-time and fields do not contain a clock that counts down toward failure. So the universe does not persist despite infinite time. It persists because infinite time does not stress it. This is the quiet cruelty or quiet mercy of an indifferent cosmos. It does not collapse under the weight of its own duration. It simply does not feel that weight. This also means that the far future is not a long wait for anything. Waiting implies anticipation. There is none. There is no state the universe is waiting to reach after heat death. No reset, no awakening, no return of complexity promised at the end of a long silence. The silence is the state, and it does not accumulate pressure. This undermines one of the last narrative instincts we bring to cosmology, the hope that persistence implies potential, that as long as something exists, something could happen again. In a maximum entropy universe, potential collapses, not because the universe forbids novelty out of principle, but because the conditions that generate novelty are gone. Persistence does not imply possibility. It only implies allowance. The universe allows itself to exist. That is all. This allowance is not granted by an external authority. It is not renewed each moment. It is simply the absence of a constraint that would end it. Ending would require a rule that says, space-time must dissolve, fields must vanish, equations must stop applying. We have no evidence of such a rule. So persistence continues, not as a process, not as an achievement, but as a default. This brings us to an uncomfortable but clarifying point. We often ask why the universe continues, as if continuation were surprising. Perhaps it is not. Perhaps the truly surprising thing was not that the universe persists after everything meaningful fades, but that meaning ever appeared within it at all. Meaning required carryover. It required memory. It required experience. It required systems capable of binding moments together and caring that they were bound. Those systems were rare and temporary. The universe does not miss them, but we do, because we are built out of carryover, out of continuity, out of memory and anticipation and identity stretched across time. When we imagine a universe without carryover, it feels wrong, like existence stripped of its spine. But the universe never had a spine. It had structure, and structure remains. This is the quiet truth, hidden beneath the idea of persistence. The universe does not need to remember itself in order to remain real. It does not need to experience itself. It does not need to carry anything forward. It only needs its rules to remain valid. And as far as we can tell, they do. This realization does not conclude anything. It does not offer resolution. It simply removes another assumption. That continuation must contain something. In the far future, continuation is empty of content, but not empty of being. And as we drift deeper into this idea, one final question begins to take shape, not about time or memory or experience, but about necessity. If nothing is carried forward, if nothing is gained or lost, if persistence requires no effort, then what would it even mean for the universe to end? What could ending possibly look like? In a reality where continuation is effortless and nothing depends on what came before, we speak about endings as if they are inevitable, as if everything that begins must conclude, as if persistence carries within it the seed of termination, as if duration itself demands closure. But the universe does not share this intuition. In the far future, the idea of an ending becomes strangely undefined, not postponed, not delayed, undefined, because an ending requires something very specific, a condition that forces change to stop and prevents continuation from resuming. An ending is not just the absence of activity. It is the removal of the framework that allows activity or even stillness to exist at all. And nothing in our current understanding of physics points to such a condition. Heat death is often mistaken for an ending because it feels final to us. Nothing interesting happens anymore. No complexity remains. No observers survive. Meaning evaporates. But none of these are requirements for existence to cease. They are requirements for stories to cease. The universe does not end when stories end. It simply becomes a place where stories can no longer form. This distinction matters more than it first appears. An ending, in the human sense, is a boundary, a last page, a final moment that stands apart from all others and gives shape to what came before. Endings compress meaning. They allow reflection. They provide symmetry. The universe does not compress. It does not reflect. It does not seek symmetry in narrative terms. Once the universe reaches equilibrium, it does not arrive at a terminal frame. It arrives at a condition that remains stable under the rules that govern it. And stability is not a countdown. There is no ticking clock embedded in equilibrium, quietly preparing the universe to shut itself off. There is no cosmic expiration date hidden inside maximum entropy. Equilibrium does not decay. It persists. This is deeply counterintuitive because we are used to systems failing. Machines break, bodies age, structures weaken. Everything we interact with exists in environments that drain them over time. The universe is not in an environment. There is nothing outside it applying pressure. There is nothing beyond it demanding that it justify its continued presence. Ending, for the universe, would require something fundamentally different from exhaustion or decay. It would require a rule that says space-time itself is no longer allowed, and we have no evidence such a rule exists. This is why cosmology struggles to speak meaningfully about the end of everything. We can describe scenarios where stars vanish, matter decays, black holes evaporate, and structure dissolves. But none of these eliminate the stage on which reality is defined. They clear the stage. They do not dismantle it. So when we ask why the universe continues, even when nothing happens, we are implicitly assuming that nothing happening should trigger an ending. But nothing happening is not a trigger. It is a state, and states do not end themselves. Endings require asymmetry, some pressure that forces transition. In a universe that has eliminated all gradients, asymmetry disappears. There is nothing pushing reality toward non-existence. The universe does not lean toward an ending. It rests. This reframes the fear of infinite existence. We imagine infinity as something unstable, something that must eventually break under its own weight. But weight is not a property of time. Time does not accumulate stress. It does not strain against duration. It simply orders, so the far future does not feel like an unresolved ending from the universe's perspective. It does not feel unresolved at all. It is complete. Complete does not mean finished. It means self-sufficient. The universe no longer needs to transition into anything else. It has reached a configuration that does not compel further change. And because it does not compel change, it also does not compel termination. This is where the idea of why finally loses its grip. Why does the universe not end? Because there is nothing that would make it. No law demands it. No instability requires it. No purpose points toward it. Ending would be arbitrary, and the universe does not act arbitrarily. This does not mean the universe is eternal in some triumphant or meaningful sense. Eternity, like ending, is a human narrative category. It implies significance stretched across time. The universe does not stretch significance. It stretches existence, and existence does not need to culminate. This can feel unsettling because we are creatures who crave closure. We feel uneasy when things do not resolve. We want the final chord, the last sentence, the conclusion that justifies the beginning. But the universe is not structured like a composition. It does not build tension with the intention of release. It simply follows its rules until there is no tension left to build. And when tension disappears, nothing instructs the universe to stop. This absence of an ending is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is not a cliff. It is a flat horizon that never arrives. We often imagine the end of the universe as a moment, a line we could, in principle, point to. But the far future offers no such moment. There is no last second, no final frame. Every moment is followed by another, not because something is happening, but because nothing forbids it. This realization quietly dissolves the question that began this journey. Why does the universe continue to exist even when nothing new happens? Because continuation is not a process that needs to be justified. It is the default state of a reality with no constraints forcing its absence. The universe does not need a reason to go on. It would need a reason to stop, and none appears. This is not comforting or frightening in itself. It is neutral. It tells us that existence is not a favor granted by meaning, experience, or purpose. Those things are local phenomena that arise and fade. Existence does not depend on them. As we drift with this thought, this idea of a universe that does not end because it has no mechanism to do so, we begin to sense the approach of a deeper shift. If the universe does not end, if it does not conclude, if it does not resolve into non-being, then perhaps non-existence was never the natural opposite of existence. Perhaps existence does not sit between birth and death at all. Perhaps it is something more subtle, something that does not need to begin and does not need to finish, something that simply allows moments to appear and disappear within it, without ever requiring a final silence. And that thought, slow and unhurried, carries us gently onward, toward a place where even the idea of beginning starts to loosen its hold. There is a final illusion that quietly dissolves when the idea of an ending disappears. That existence must be opposed. We are used to thinking of reality as something that persists against forces decay, against construction, chaos against order, death against life. Every form of endurance we know is framed as resistance. To exist is to withstand something trying to erase you. But the far future of the universe contains no opposition. Nothing pushes against existence. Nothing competes with it. Nothing tries to replace it. And without opposition, existence stops looking like a struggle. In a heat-dead universe, there is no enemy left, no entropy still rising, no structure still being dismantled, no gradient still flattening. All conflicts that once gave direction to change have already resolved themselves. What remains is not victory, it is neutrality. This is difficult to grasp because conflict is how we make sense of persistence. We understand survival because we understand threat. We understand stability because we understand instability pressing against it. But when there is nothing left to push back, persistence becomes effortless and therefore invisible. The universe does not continue in spite of anything. It continues because there is nothing left that could challenge it. This reframes the idea of cosmic struggle. For most of its history, the universe appeared dynamic because forces were in tension. Expansion against gravity, radiation against matter, order against entropy, life against environmental collapse. These tensions created motion, drama, and change. But tension was never permanent. Once tensions resolve, the universe does not collapse. It relaxes, and relaxation does not reverse itself. In the far future, there is no cosmic tug-of-war still playing out, no opposing trends fighting for dominance, no instability waiting to tip the balance toward annihilation. Everything that could oppose existence has already been neutralized. There is no pressure left to drive the universe anywhere else. This absence of opposition feels unsettling because we are creatures shaped by friction. We evolved in a world where resistance defined reality, where gravity pulled, predators hunted, environments punished mistakes. We learned to interpret existence as something earned through effort. The universe does not share this story. Its existence is not earned, it is allowed. This idea forces a quiet reconsideration of what it means for something to continue. We often imagine continuation as an active process, something that must be sustained. But in the far future, continuation is passive. It happens because nothing interrupts it. The universe does not need to defend itself against non-existence. Non-existence is not a force pressing in from the outside. There is no boundary where being meets nothingness and must constantly hold the line. Non-existence, in physics, is not an opposing state waiting to reclaim reality. It is simply not realized. This undermines a deep-seated fear that existence is fragile, that it could blink out at any moment if it loses balance, that the universe is precariously suspended over nothingness. But nothingness does not behave like an active threat. It does not pull. It does not invade. It does not erode. Existence does not need to fend it off. This becomes clearer when we examine how endings usually occur. Things end when something interferes, when fuel runs out, when structures collapse, when opposing forces overwhelm stability. In a maximum entropy universe, interference is gone. There is no fuel left to run out of in a way that changes anything. No structure left to collapse. No gradients left to be overwhelmed. Existence has no opponent left to lose to, so it stays. This absence of opposition also dissolves the idea of tension within time itself. We often think of time as something that moves forward because it must, because something is pushing it along. But time does not require propulsion. It does not need a force to keep it going. Time is simply the ordering of states within space-time. As long as space-time remains coherent, time remains valid. Nothing pushes time forward. Nothing pulls it back. It is not a struggle. This reframes the fear that the universe is somehow hanging on past its moment of relevance, that after everything meaningful fades, existence becomes strained or artificial. But nothing is strained. There is no effort involved. The universe is not tired of being. It does not long for an ending. Those longings belong to beings who experience fatigue, boredom, or despair. The universe does not experience. In the far future, existence is not dramatic enough to be tragic. There is no loss because nothing is being taken away. There is no victory because nothing is being overcome. There is simply no contest left to define outcomes. This neutrality challenges another hidden assumption, that existence and non-existence are two sides of a balance, constantly vying for dominance. But they are not symmetric. Existence follows rules. Non-existence does not. Existence unfolds according to laws that either apply or do not. Non-existence has no laws because there is nothing there to obey them. As long as the laws of physics remain internally consistent, existence remains. Non-existence cannot win because it does not act. This is why the universe does not drift toward nothingness once all activity fades. Drift implies direction. Direction implies force. There is no force pushing the universe toward erasure, so the universe stays where it is. This realization removes another layer of anthropomorphic thinking. We often imagine the universe as something that must be maintained, as if reality were a delicate structure that could collapse if left unattended. But unattended is the default. There is no caretaker. There never was. The universe is not being held together by intention or effort. It is not being actively preserved. It simply does not fall apart because there is nothing left to make it fall apart. This creates a strange calm. A universe without opposition is a universe without urgency. Nothing needs to be resolved. Nothing needs to be defended. Nothing needs to be achieved. There is no cosmic pressure to move forward or backward. The universe has settled into a configuration that does not require negotiation. This also reframes how we think about instability. We often assume that if something lasts forever, it must eventually destabilize. That infinite duration implies eventual breakdown. But breakdown requires competing forces. In the absence of opposition, stability is not fragile. It is permanent. This permanence does not feel triumphant. It feels flat, uneventful, almost empty of character. But character is something we assign when we observe struggle, change, and contrast. In the far future, there is none left. The universe is not dramatic enough to have a personality. It is simply there. This can feel unsettling because it removes the last trace of narrative tension from existence. There is no question left about what happens next. Not because everything has been answered, but because nothing is waiting. The future is not open in the way we understand openness. It is not full of branching possibilities. It is full of repetition. Possibility requires difference. Difference requires opposition. Opposition is gone. So possibility collapses into allowance. Whatever happens is allowed, but almost nothing can happen. This is not a prison. Prisons require boundaries and desire to escape. The universe has neither. It is not confined by its state. It simply occupies it. This neutrality also dissolves fear in a subtle way. Fear requires anticipation of harm. Harm requires the possibility of things getting worse. In a maximum entropy universe, worse has no meaning. Nothing improves. Nothing degrades. Nothing escalates. The universe does not spiral. It rests. And resting, unlike struggle, does not demand attention. This leads us to a final inversion. We often ask why the universe does not end, as if ending were the natural outcome of exhaustion. But exhaustion applies to systems that resist forces. The universe is no longer resisting anything, so it does not exhaust. Ending would require a final opponent. There is none. As we drift with this idea, existence without opposition, persistence without struggle, we begin to sense the contours of an even deeper stillness. A stillness not defined by emptiness, but by lack of tension. A reality that continues not because it must overcome something, but because nothing asks it to stop. And as that stillness settles, another quiet thought begins to form, one that does not ask about time or memory or purpose, but about justification. If existence does not struggle, if it is not opposed, if it is not earned, then perhaps existence never needed justification at all. Perhaps being was never something that had to be defended, only something that, once present, simply remained. And with that thought, the universe grows even quieter as we drift onward into the last, thinnest layers of reason we still carry with us. At some point, the question quietly exhausts itself. Why does the universe exist at all? We ask this as if existence were a claim that needs defending, as if being present were something that must be argued for, supported, or earned, as if reality itself were standing trial, required to explain why it is not withdrawn. But in the far future of the universe, this question loses its footing. There is no judge left to ask it, no standard left to measure against, no framework in which justification would even make sense. Existence does not present a case for itself. It does not explain. It does not persuade. It does not appeal. It simply is. This is one of the most uncomfortable ideas for a mind shaped by reasons. We live inside chains of cause and effect. We expect explanations. We believe that if something persists, there must be a reason behind it, some function it serves, some purpose it fulfills. But the universe does not serve a function. Function is a concept invented by systems with goals. The universe has none. In the heat-dead future, there is nothing left that asks why. No curiosity, no dissatisfaction, no urge to understand. Without these, justification becomes meaningless, not wrong, not denied, but irrelevant. Existence does not require approval. This challenges a deep human instinct, the instinct to believe that things must deserve to continue, that what lasts must be valuable, and what ends must have failed in some way. The universe does not evaluate itself. It does not rank states as better or worse, meaningful or empty. It does not look back at its own history and decide which chapters mattered. Those judgments belong to observers. When observers vanish, judgment vanishes with them. What remains is not a universe that has lost meaning. It is a universe that was never built on meaning to begin with. Meaning was something that briefly appeared inside it, like a reflection on a still surface that disappears when the light shifts. This does not make meaning illusory. It makes it local. Justification, like meaning, is a tool used by minds navigating limited environments. It helps decide actions, allocate resources, resolve uncertainty. The universe does not act, so it does not justify. In the far future, existence is not maintained because it has a reason. It is maintained because there is no requirement for it not to be. This flips the usual logic completely. We tend to think that existence is fragile and non-existence is the default, that things must work to stay real, and failure leads to disappearance. But in a universe without opposition, without decay still in motion, without instability pressing from outside, non-existence is not the default. Existence is. Ending would require an intervention, and there is none. This is why the universe feels so indifferent to questions of worth. Worth implies comparison. Comparison implies preference. Preference implies perspective. The universe has no perspective, so it does not weigh itself against alternatives. It does not consider the possibility that it should not be here. That possibility exists only in minds capable of imagining absence. Once those minds are gone, the idea evaporates. This leads to a strange calm. A reality that does not need to justify itself is a reality free of anxiety. There is no pressure to perform, no standard to meet, no expectation to fulfill. The universe does not fear irrelevance. It does not fear emptiness. Those fears belong to creatures who depend on relevance to survive. In the heat-dead future, there is no survival. There is only being. This can feel unsettling because it removes the last trace of moral or narrative structure from existence. There is no cosmic ought, no sense that the universe should be one way rather than another. But that absence of obligation is precisely what allows existence to remain unburdened. The universe does not owe anyone anything, not explanation, not meaning, not an ending. It does not apologize for continuing. It does not celebrate itself for doing so. It simply does not stop. This is where the question, why does the universe continue, finally begins to dissolve, not because it has been answered, but because it has lost its relevance. Why implies a goal, a reason, a motivation. The universe has none of these. It does not continue in order to anything. It continues because continuation is permitted. And permission, in this context, is not granted. It is the absence of prohibition. This idea strips away the last anthropomorphic layer we often place on cosmology. The idea that reality must somehow account for itself, as if existence were an act that needed to be explained. But existence is not an act. It is a condition. And conditions do not justify themselves. They simply obtain. This reframing can feel stark, even cold. But it also carries a strange relief. It releases existence from the burden of narrative coherence, from the demand that everything must make sense in human terms. The universe does not exist for sense-making. Sense-making happened within it for a while, then it stopped, and the universe did not notice. This does not diminish the intensity or sincerity of the questions we once asked. It only reveals their scope. They mattered deeply while there were minds to ask them. They do not echo forward indefinitely. The universe does not preserve questions once questioners are gone. This is not indifference as cruelty. It is indifference as absence. There is no one left to be indifferent. And so existence settles into a state where justification no longer applies. Not because it has been achieved, but because the concept itself has faded. The universe does not need to explain why it exists. It never did. This realization is not dramatic. It does not arrive like a revelation. It settles slowly, like dust after movement has ceased. A quiet understanding that being does not require defense. That reality does not need permission. That continuation is not a choice. It is simply what remains when nothing demands change. And as this thought lingers, soft, unresolved, unhurried, we begin to approach the deepest stillness yet. A place where even questions stop forming, where even the idea of why grows thin and transparent. And beyond that thinning, another thought waits, one that does not ask about reason or justification at all, but about necessity. If existence does not need to be justified, If it does not need to be opposed, if it does not need to be experienced, then perhaps existence does not need to be necessary either. Perhaps it is not here because it must be, but because nothing ever told it not to be. There is a quiet shift that happens when justification falls away. The question changes. Not why does the universe exist, but does it have to? We are used to thinking in terms of necessity. Hearts must beat. Stars must burn fuel. Causes must precede effects. In our world, persistence is usually explained by requirement. If something continues, we assume it is because something forces it to. But the far future of the universe does not appear to be forced by anything at all. Existence, there, is not necessary, and it is not unnecessary either. It simply happens to be the case. This is one of the most unsettling ideas of all, because necessity is how we anchor understanding. We believe that if something exists, it must either be required by deeper laws or demanded by some ultimate principle. If it were not necessary, we assume it would not be there. But the universe does not behave like a logical argument. It does not arrive at itself by proof. In the heat-dead future, there is no sense in which the universe must continue. There is no rule that says reality is obligated to persist. No axiom that demands space-time remain intact forever. At the same time, there is no rule that forbids it. So existence occupies a strange middle ground, not compelled, not prohibited. Allowed. This idea feels fragile, because allowed sounds temporary, as if permission could be revoked. But permission, here, is not granted by an authority. It is simply the absence of constraint. The universe is not necessary in the way mathematics feels necessary. 2 + 2 must equal 4. Logical contradictions cannot exist. Those necessities are internal. The universe does not share that kind of inevitability. Its laws describe how it behaves if it exists. They do not explain why it exists rather than not, and they do not require it to cease once complexity fades. So in the far future, existence continues without justification, without purpose, and now without necessity. This strips away another comfort. We often tell ourselves that even if life fades, the universe must go on for some grand reason, that it is required by some deeper structure of reality, that non-existence is somehow impossible or unstable. But physics does not say this. Physics remains silent. It describes continuation, not compulsion. This silence is not a flaw. It is a boundary. It tells us that necessity is not written into the fabric of being. Existence is not guaranteed by logic. It is not demanded by purpose. It is not enforced by meaning. It is simply what happens when nothing interrupts it. This makes the far future feel strangely contingent, as if reality itself is resting on nothing more than the absence of a stopping condition. But contingency does not imply fragility. Something can be contingent and still persist indefinitely if nothing ever arises to end it. The universe does not need to be necessary to last forever. It only needs to avoid contradiction. And so far, it does. This reframes the way we think about non-existence. We often imagine non-existence as the default state, the background to which everything returns when it fails. But non-existence is not a state the universe is moving toward. It is not a basin pulling reality inward. It is simply the absence of reality. And absence does not exert force. So existence does not have to justify itself against non-existence. It does not have to prove its necessity. It just remains, because nothing requires it not to. This can feel deeply unsatisfying, because it denies us the final explanation we crave. We want a reason beneath all reasons, a necessity beneath all contingencies. But the universe offers no such foundation. It offers persistence without mandate. This does not make existence arbitrary in the sense of random choice. It makes it non-teleological, not aimed, not required, not selected for. The universe is not here because it must be. It is here because it is. This realization dissolves another human habit, the habit of expecting reality to answer us, to explain itself, in terms that resolve discomfort. But the far future does not comfort. It clarifies. It shows us a universe that continues without needing permission from logic, meaning, or necessity. A universe that does not owe us an explanation. This can feel cold, but it also removes pressure. If existence does not need to be necessary, then it also does not need to be optimal, or justified, or improved. It does not need to be redeemed by complexity. The quiet universe after heat death is not a failure of necessity. It is simply a configuration that remains possible. This leads to a subtle inversion. Perhaps the question was never, why does the universe continue? Perhaps the deeper question is why we expected it to stop, why we assumed existence needed a reason to persist rather than a reason to end. That assumption comes from living short lives, in fragile bodies, inside systems where persistence is costly and endings are common. The universe does not live inside such a system. It is the system. And systems do not need to be necessary to exist. They only need to be coherent. As we sit with this thought, existence without necessity, persistence without mandate, the universe grows even quieter. There is no urgency left in it, no requirement to resolve itself, no demand to conclude. And in that quiet, another idea begins to surface, thin, distant, almost transparent. If existence does not need to be necessary, if it does not need to be justified, if it does not need to be experienced, then perhaps existence does not even need to be preferred. Perhaps reality does not care whether it is here or not. And if that is true, then the final stillness is not about ending or continuation at all, but about indifference so complete that even the question of being loses its weight. At the deepest layer of this silence, even preference dissolves. We are accustomed to thinking that existence must, in some way, want to exist, that being present is better than not being present, that reality leans toward itself, choosing continuation over absence. But the far future of the universe shows no such leaning. There is no preference at the core of reality. The universe does not favor being over non-being. It does not resist absence. It does not cling to presence. It simply does not choose. This idea is unsettling because preference is how we orient ourselves. We live by inclination toward warmth, toward light, toward continuation. We assume that what persists must, in some sense, prefer to persist. But preference is an internal state. It requires evaluation, and evaluation requires experience. The universe does not evaluate itself. In the heat-dead future, there is no sense in which reality is glad to exist or afraid to end. Those emotions belong to organisms that evolved under pressure, where preference was necessary for survival. The universe never needed to survive. It has never been under threat, so it has never learned to care. This is not indifference, as neglect or apathy. Apathy implies a choice not to care. The universe does not choose not to care. It simply does not possess the machinery required for caring to exist. At the most fundamental level, the laws of physics do not encode preference. They describe relationships, constraints, and symmetries. They do not rank outcomes as better or worse. They do not favor continuation over cessation. They only state what happens if a state exists. And in the far future, those statements continue to apply not because they are preferred, but because nothing invalidates them. This is the quiet heart of cosmic indifference. Existence is not upheld by desire. It is not defended by fear. It is not sustained by hope. It is sustained by nothing at all. This realization removes another subtle layer of anthropomorphism. We often imagine the universe as something that, deep down, wants to be, as if being is the default choice in a cosmic decision. But there is no decision. The universe does not choose to continue any more than it chose to begin. Choice requires alternatives to be weighed. There is no one to weigh them. So existence does not sit on one side of a scale, balancing itself against non-existence. The scale does not exist. This makes the persistence of reality feel strangely weightless. not heavy with significance, not anchored by necessity, just present, without leaning. This weightlessness can feel destabilizing because we rely on preference to anchor meaning. We believe that what is preferred is what should be preserved. But the universe does not preserve itself because it prefers itself. It persists because nothing interferes. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. Interference would be required to end existence. Ending would require an active change in the rules or the removal of the framework that allows states to follow one another. Indifference does not cause interference. So indifference allows persistence. This is why the universe can be completely indifferent to its own state and yet continue indefinitely. Indifference is not a force pushing toward absence. It is simply the absence of bias. An absence of bias does not terminate reality. It leaves it untouched. In the far future, there is no cosmic satisfaction in equilibrium, no sense that the universe has reached a desirable state. There is also no disappointment that complexity has faded. Those reactions require a point of view. The universe has none. So equilibrium is not celebrated or lamented. It is just a configuration. This challenges a deeply ingrained narrative instinct, the instinct to believe that reality must, at some level, care about itself. That existence has a built-in inclination to preserve, expand, or justify itself. But the heat-dead future suggests something else entirely. Existence does not need to care in order to remain. Care was never part of the foundation. It was a temporary phenomenon that emerged when conditions allowed matter to form self-referential systems. Those systems cared intensely. The universe did not. And when those systems vanish, caring vanishes with them. The universe does not inherit it. This absence of preference also dissolves the idea of tragedy at a cosmic scale. Tragedy requires loss relative to a desired state. It requires the sense that something that should have continued has ended. But in the far future, nothing should have continued. There is no normative baseline, so the disappearance of life, meaning, and experience is not tragic to the universe. It is merely a transition between states. This does not diminish the intensity of loss while there were beings to feel it. Tragedy was real when tragedy could be felt. But tragedy does not persist as a cosmic property. It does not stain space-time. It does not linger in the background. It ends with the last mind capable of recognizing it. What remains is indifference, not as coldness, but as neutrality beyond emotion. This neutrality allows the universe to continue without strain. There is no inner conflict about whether it should exist, no debate about value, no pressure to resolve into something else. It simply occupies the state it occupies. This makes the far future feel eerily stable, not frozen, not locked, but unconcerned, a reality that does not lean in any direction. And in that unconcern, existence becomes strangely effortless. It does not push forward. It does not pull back. It does not hold itself together. It simply remains coherent. This brings us to a point where even the concept of continuation begins to feel thin. If the universe does not prefer to exist, then continuing is not something it is trying to do. It is simply not stopping. Stopping would require preference too, a preference for absence over presence. The universe has neither. So it rests in a state where being and non-being are not weighed against each other. Only being is realized. Non-being is not an alternative waiting in the wings. It is simply not there. This is the deepest stillness we have approached so far, a reality without urgency, without justification, without necessity, and now without preference. A reality that does not ask whether it should exist. It just does. And as this thought settles, almost imperceptibly, another idea begins to drift into view. If the universe does not prefer existence, if it does not care whether it is here or not, then perhaps the final quiet truth is this. Existence is not something the universe chooses. It is something that happens when nothing interrupts it. And if that is so, then the most profound silence is not the absence of things, but the absence of choice itself, a silence so complete that even being no longer needs a reason to remain. At this depth of stillness, even choice disappears. We often imagine existence as the result of a decision explicit or hidden, as if, at some level, reality chose to begin, chose to continue, chose not to collapse into nothingness. Choice is how we make sense of persistence, because choice is how we act. But the universe does not choose. Choice requires alternatives to be weighed. It requires preference. It requires a point of view. None of these exist at the core of reality. In the far future, when every trace of intention has vanished, existence does not feel selected. It feels unselected. Not favored over non-existence, not rescued from it, simply present, without having passed through a decision point. This is deeply unsettling because choice is how we assign responsibility. We believe that if something happens, someone or something must have chosen it. That persistence implies will, but will is a feature of minds, and minds were temporary. When the last minds dissolve, the universe does not inherit their decision-making machinery. It does not continue because it wants to. It continues because nothing introduces a choice to end. There is no cosmic moment where reality asks itself whether it should go on. That moment never existed. Even at the beginning, there is no evidence that the universe chose to appear. There is no record of deliberation, no trace of intention. The laws of physics describe evolution, not volition. They explain how states follow one another, not why they were selected. And in the far future, this becomes even clearer. Existence does not sit at a crossroads between being and non-being. There is no crossroads. There is only a path that does not branch. This removes the last trace of drama from continuation. Drama requires decisions, turning points, forks where something could have gone another way. In the heat-dead universe, there are no forks left. Everything that could branch already has, and those branches collapsed long ago into sameness. So the universe does not continue because it chooses existence over absence. It continues because absence never presents itself as an option. Non-existence is not a state the universe can enter by deciding to do so. There is no mechanism for choosing not to be. Choice implies control over alternatives. The universe does not stand outside itself to evaluate alternatives. It simply unfolds. This is why the idea of an end feels increasingly incoherent the deeper we go. Endings require decisions or failures. Something must choose to stop, or be forced to stop by something else. But nothing forces the universe to stop, and nothing chooses to. So being persists not as an act, but as a condition that remains unchallenged. This reframes the idea of agency entirely. We often attribute agency to the universe when we speak metaphorically, saying it allows, permits, or lets things happen. But these words quietly reintroduce choice. In truth, the universe does not allow or forbid. It simply behaves according to rules that do not include preference. This makes existence feel strangely impersonal, almost anonymous. A reality without authorship, no signature, no intent behind the fact that it is here. And yet, it is here. This absence of choice also dissolves the last trace of responsibility we sometimes project onto the cosmos. We ask whether the universe is responsible for suffering, for impermanence, for loss. Responsibility requires agency. The universe has none. Suffering existed while minds existed to suffer. Loss mattered while beings existed to grieve. When those beings vanish, suffering and loss do not echo forward as moral stains. They end. The universe does not answer for them. This is not absolution. It is irrelevance. Moral categories do not apply beyond the systems that generate them. In the far future, existence is beyond praise and beyond blame. It is beyond choice. This can feel deeply unsettling because it removes the last trace of intentional structure from reality. We are left with a universe that does not choose to be here, does not choose to remain, and does not choose to end. It simply is. And that is not defended by decision. It is not upheld by will. It is not sustained by commitment. It is just not interrupted. This brings us to a subtle inversion of how we usually think about control. We often believe that to continue, something must exert control, that stability requires maintenance, that without active management, things fall apart. But in the far future, there is nothing left to manage, no complexity to maintain, no imbalance to correct, no structure to defend. So control disappears. And with it, choice. What remains is a kind of automaticity, not mechanical, not intentional, but structural. Reality follows from itself without deliberation. This automaticity is not blind. It is not purposeful either. It is simply consistent. The universe does not ask whether it should exist tomorrow. Tomorrow exists because today exists, and nothing breaks the link. This link is not chosen. It is given by the structure of space-time itself. And this is where the question that once felt so urgent finally loses its force. Why does the universe continue? Because continuation is not something it does. It is something that happens when nothing intervenes. The universe is not active in its persistence. It is passive. This passivity is not weakness. It is depth, a depth where even the concept of choice becomes unnecessary. As we drift with this idea being without choice, existence without decision, we begin to approach the final quiet, a place where even the language of continuation feels too active, where going on implies motion that no longer matters, and beyond that, something even thinner waits. If existence does not choose, if it does not prefer, if it does not justify itself, then perhaps the final truth is not about why the universe exists, but about how existence itself is nothing more than the absence of interruption, a silence so complete that even choice has faded from it. And in that silence, reality remains not because it decided to, but because nothing ever told it to stop. At this depth, the word continuation begins to feel misleading. It suggests motion. It suggests effort. It suggests that something is actively being carried forward. But what remains of the universe now is quieter than that. The universe does not continue. It is simply not interrupted. This distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. We are used to thinking of reality as something that flows like a river, moving from source to mouth. But rivers flow because gravity pulls them, because terrain shapes them, because energy is being spent. In the far future of the universe, nothing is pulling, nothing is shaping, nothing is being spent. So the image of flow no longer applies. What remains is a condition that persists only because no condition has arisen to end it. Interruption is an active concept. It requires a boundary, a force, a discontinuity. And in a universe that has dissolved all gradients, all tensions, all oppositions, there is nothing left capable of creating a discontinuity. The universe does not resist interruption. It simply never encounters it. This reframes the deepest fear hidden beneath the question of heat death. The fear is not really about emptiness or cold or silence. It is about the idea that existence should notice when it has gone too far, that there should be a moment when reality recognizes itself as finished. But recognition requires awareness, and awareness is gone. So there is no moment of recognition, no moment when the universe says, "This is enough." Without minds, there is no enough. There is only what is. In the far future, time still orders states, but nothing marks them. No event punctuates the sequence. No change announces itself as meaningful. And without marks, there is no place for interruption to insert itself. Interruption requires contrast. It requires a before and an after that differ sharply enough to be noticed. In a universe that has become almost perfectly uniform, there is nowhere for such contrast to arise. Everything blends. This is why heat death is not a cliff. It is a fog. You do not arrive at it. You simply realize, too late to point to a moment, that you are already inside it. And once inside, nothing pushes you out. The universe does not cross into non-existence because there is no edge to cross. Non-existence is not a region adjacent to existence. It is the absence of regions altogether. This is one of the most difficult ideas to accept, because our language treats non-existence as a place something the universe could fall into. But falling implies gravity, direction, a lower state. Non-existence has none of these. There is no gradient pulling reality toward absence. So existence remains where it is, not anchored, not held, just not displaced. This absence of interruption also dissolves the last illusion of cosmic urgency. There is nothing that needs to happen before it is too late. There is no now or never, end quote. Never is not approaching. Now is not special. Every moment is structurally equivalent to the next. And this equivalence removes pressure. The universe is not racing toward an end. It is not running out of time. Time does not run out. It simply continues to order what little remains. This is why the far future feels strangely peaceful when stripped of human projection. There is no crisis left unresolved. Crisis requires stakes. Stakes require loss. Loss requires someone to lose something. There is no one left. So the universe does not experience its own persistence as burden or mistake. It does not feel trapped in being. It does not long for interruption. Those longings belong to conscious systems navigating finite lifespans. The universe does not navigate. It does not orient. It does not seek. It simply does not stop. And even does not stop implies motion. A better description is this: nothing happens that would make it stop. This absence is enough. It does not need reinforcement. It does not need maintenance. It does not need explanation. The universe is not waiting for a final switch to be flipped. There is no switch. This is where many narratives about cosmology quietly fail. They search for a dramatic terminus, a moment of collapse, a return to nothing, a final silence. But silence is not an event. It is the absence of events. And absence does not culminate. It spreads evenly. Once spread completely, it does not deepen. It simply remains. This also reframes how we think about beginnings. We often assume that because something began, it must end, that existence is symmetric, but beginnings are special because they involve change. They involve transitions. They involve asymmetry. The far future involves none of these. So symmetry does not demand an ending. The universe does not mirror its beginning with a corresponding finale. It fades into uniformity and then stays there, not because it must, because nothing ever interrupts that state. This is the final erosion of narrative thinking. There is no climax, no resolution, no final act, just an ever-present condition that does not require action to sustain itself. This condition is not empty in the sense of absence. It is empty of necessity, empty of urgency, empty of reason. And in that emptiness, existence becomes almost transparent. So transparent that asking why it remains feels like asking why silence is silent. There is nothing there to answer, and nothing there that needs answering. As we drift with this understanding, the universe feels less like a thing that is happening and more like a background that has stopped distinguishing itself from absence without ever becoming absent. A presence so thin it does not assert itself, so quiet it does not announce its own continuation. And in that quiet, another realization approaches slowly, without emphasis. If existence remains only because nothing interrupts it, then interruption, not existence, was always the anomaly. The universe did not need a reason to stay. It would have needed a reason to stop, and none ever came. So it remains, not actively, not deliberately, just unbroken. And as this thought settles, there is very little left to say. Only one more layer of quiet remains. A place where even the idea of existence becomes gentle enough to let go of the need to explain itself. And toward that place, we drift, not toward an ending, but into a stillness that has no opposite. At this point, even the idea of remaining becomes fragile, because remaining implies that something else could have happened instead. Contrast is how we recognize reality. Light against dark, sound against silence, movement against stillness. But in the far future of the universe, contrast has thinned to the point of near erasure. Not eliminated, just no longer meaningful. Existence does not stand out against non-existence, because there is no boundary where one gives way to the other. There is no edge to cross, no line to mark the difference. Without contrast, being does not announce itself. It does not feel present. It does not feel absent either. It simply does not distinguish itself. This is perhaps the most alien state we can approach with thought, a reality so uniform that it does not even contrast with the idea of nothingness, without ever becoming nothing. We tend to imagine non-existence as a dark void waiting beyond reality, but that image already contains contrast, dark against light, void against presence. In the far future, such images no longer apply. There is no dark, because darkness requires eyes. There is no void, because void implies space being noticed as empty. Without observers, without experience, without memory, even emptiness loses its meaning. What remains is not an empty universe. It is a universe without emphasis. Everything that once made existence noticeable, events, structure, tension, awareness, has dissolved into sameness. And sameness, when complete enough, erases the ability to compare. Without comparison, nothing stands out. Without standing out, existence becomes quiet to the point of invisibility. This does not mean the universe has vanished. It means it no longer contrasts with alternatives that require a perspective to recognize. Contrast is a relationship, and relationships require relata things capable of being compared. In the heat-dead universe, there are no such comparisons left. No hot and cold, no before and after that matters. No inside and outside, no observer and observed. These distinctions were scaffolding. They allowed reality to appear articulated. When they collapse, reality does not collapse with them. It becomes smooth. This smoothness is not emptiness. It is saturation. Everything is everywhere in the only way it can be, uniformly, evenly, without variation large enough to matter. And in such saturation, existence does not assert itself. It does not say, "I am here." It does not need to. This is why the far future feels so difficult to imagine. Our minds rely on contrast to generate images, concepts, and meaning. When contrast fades, imagination loses traction. There is nothing to grab onto. The universe becomes something that cannot be pictured, only gestured toward. A state where being and not being are no longer opposed concepts. Not because they are the same, but because opposition itself has faded. This dissolves one of the last human intuitions, that existence must be distinguishable in order to be real. But distinguishable to whom? Reality does not require an audience, and without an audience, distinction loses purpose. Existence does not need to announce itself in order to persist. It does not need to be set against a backdrop of absence. It simply occupies the configuration it occupies. This occupation is not dramatic. It does not unfold. It does not accumulate. It does not resolve. It just is. At this depth, the question, why does the universe continue, no longer feels unanswered. It feels misplaced. Continuation implies contrast with stopping. Stopping is not present. So continuation is not a choice or a process. It is just the lack of an alternative being realized. This reframes the entire arc of the universe in a subtle way. The early universe was loud because contrast was extreme. The middle universe was rich because contrast was structured. The far future is quiet because contrast has dissolved. None of these phases is more real than the others. They are simply different regimes of distinction. As distinction fades, existence becomes less noticeable, not less existent. And here, near the end of what can be said, one final understanding settles in. Existence does not need contrast to remain. Contrast was how existence became interesting, not how it became possible. So when interest fades, possibility remains. The universe does not require sharp edges to persist. It does not need difference to justify being. It only needs coherence, and coherence remains. This is why the universe does not end with a bang, a collapse, or a return to nothingness. It ends with the disappearance of contrast, and then it does not end at all. It simply stays in that smooth, undifferentiated state. A presence without emphasis, a being without outline, a reality that no longer stands out even from its own absence. And as we drift here, at the edge of articulation, there is only one movement left. Not forward, not backward, but inward, toward a final quiet so complete that even the idea of existence loosens its grip, not to vanish, but to become indistinguishable from the stillness that surrounds it. At the very end of what language can still reach, even the word existence begins to soften, not disappear, not negate itself, just lose its sharpness, because words like being, presence, continuation, all belong to a world where something is still being noticed, where there is an inside that feels and an outside that is felt. In the far future of the universe, there is no inside left. Nothing feels itself existing, and yet nothing stops. This is the quiet resolution that was never a conclusion. The universe does not arrive at a final state and declare itself finished. It does not cross a line where existence hands itself over to absence. There is no last moment, no terminal frame, no closing breath. There is only a gradual thinning of everything that once made existence noticeable. First, events fade, then meaning, then memory, then experience, then contrast, until what remains is so uniform, so unarticulated, that even the idea of remaining feels too active. What is left does not feel like existence, but it does not feel like non-existence either, because feeling is gone. And without feeling, the distinction loses its edge. This is where the original question finally dissolves, not answered, but outgrown. Why does the universe continue to exist even when nothing new happens? Because continuation was never something it did. It was something that happened when nothing required interruption. The universe does not carry itself forward. It does not sustain itself. It does not affirm itself. It simply does not end. Ending would require a moment of separation, a break, a boundary, a decision. None ever arrives. So existence stretches into a state where it no longer announces itself, where it no longer contrasts with alternatives, where it no longer needs to be named, not because it has failed, but because everything that once framed it has quietly stepped away. In this final stillness, the universe is not empty in any experiential sense. There is no darkness, no cold, no loneliness. Those words belong to nervous systems, to perception, to expectation. Here, there is no one left to experience absence as loss. So absence is not present. There is only configuration, structure without narrative, time without texture, being without awareness. And this is not a tragedy. Tragedy requires a witness. It is not peace either. Peace requires relief. This is something deeper than both. A neutrality so complete that even neutrality is not felt. If you try to imagine this future, your mind will keep reaching for images, blackness, silence, void. But those are metaphors built from sensation. They cannot survive here. This future is not dark. Darkness requires eyes. It is not silent. Silence requires ears. It is not empty. Emptiness requires expectation. It is simply unexperienced, and yet fully real. This is the final inversion. The universe does not need to be experienced to exist. Experience was a temporary visitor. For a brief window, the universe felt itself through minds like yours. It noticed change. It cared about difference. It asked questions and feared endings. That window closed. The universe did not notice it closing. It did not mark the moment. It did not remember. And still, it remained. Not because it was meant to. Not because it had to. Not because it was chosen. But because nothing ever arrived to make it stop. In this far future, existence no longer presses itself forward. It no longer contrasts with absence. It no longer needs to justify itself, or be noticed, or be understood. It simply occupies. And perhaps that is the quietest truth hidden inside all our questions. That existence was never something the universe did. It was something that happened when nothing interrupted it. And now, as everything that could interrupt has faded away, existence becomes so gentle that it almost disappears into itself. Not gone, just no longer asking to be seen. If you are still listening, let your thoughts slow here. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to reach. No final answer waiting ahead, only a stillness that does not need to conclude. Close your eyes now. The universe is still here, and it does not need anyone to know it.